Author, educator, and Nobel Prize winner Toni Morrison has died. She was the first Black female author to receive the Nobel Prize.
Before the world knew her as Toni Morrison, she was Chloe Wofford, born in Lorain, Ohio during the Great Depression. A mother, a professor, a literary trailblazer. But most of all, Toni Morrison lived to tell stories.
Free. Now I own the world. I mean, I can write about anything, to anyone, for anyone.
She broke barriers as a beloved author. This morning, we've learned Nobel Prize-winning author Toni Morrison has died. Her publisher announced Morrison died last night at a medical center in New York. She was the first Black woman to receive the Nobel Literature Prize, awarded in 1993.
She captures it all, and with a critical lens, but with such beautiful writing at the same time.
The Swedish Academy hailed her use of language as a visionary force. Her novel Beloved, in which a mother makes a tragic choice to murder her baby to save the girl from slavery, won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction in 1988. Morrison was 88.
Toni Morrison, one of the world's most celebrated writers.
The point of writing is to take what's common and estrange it, make it new again, and to take what's strange and familiarize it.
Born Chloe Anthony Wofford in 1931, Morrison had an interest in storytelling at a very young age. Her father often told her African-American folk tales, something she would later weave into her work. Morrison attended both Howard and Cornell universities. She began teaching at the height of the civil rights movement. It was then Chloe became known as Toni Morrison. Toni a nickname, and Morrison the last name of her ex-husband. During her time teaching, she began sharing stories with a campus writing group. One of those stories became her first book, The Bluest Eye. Released in 1970, the novel was praised for its in-depth look at race and American beauty standards, but criticized for its explicit nature. Morrison became more widely known in 1977 with Song of Solomon. The book was a feature selection for the Book of the Month Club, the first written by an African American in nearly 40 years. Morrison became known for characters who challenged views on race and gender.
I don't describe any of my characters. I mean, a little bit, you know, this tall, short man, woman, but nobody knows what they look like. And the reason is deliberate, because I want you to do that.
No novel had greater impact than Beloved. Loosely based on a true story of a runaway slave, the book won the Pulitzer Prize in 1988. A decade later, Oprah Winfrey took the story to the silver screen, but the film tanked at the box office. Morrison's prolific storytelling was acknowledged internationally. In 1993, she became the first Black woman to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. The same year, she nearly lost it all in a fire on Christmas Day. Only a portion of her manuscript survived. But tragedy struck again Christmas of 2010. Her son Slade died of pancreatic cancer. The death weighed heavily on Morrison, and she didn't write a sentence for months. Toni Morrison left an indelible mark on literature, spanning over 5 decades. While presenting her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, President Obama said this.
Toni Morrison's prose brings us that kind of moral and emotional intensity that few writers ever attempt.
CBS 2's Kenneth Craig has more on her life and legacy.
What might your name be?
Beloved.
It was her 1987 novel Beloved, later taken to the big screen and starring Oprah Winfrey,
So help me, Jesus.
that landed Toni Morrison the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. The work was inspired by the story of an American slave who makes the choice to murder her baby to save the girl from slavery. Morrison wrote 11 novels, 5 children's books, plays, and even an opera during her 6-decade career. In 2012, Morrison received the highest U.S. civilian award when Fan and President Obama draped her with the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
My grandfather bragged all the time that he had read the Bible, and it was illegal in his life to read. Ultimately, I knew that words have power.
A documentary on her life called The Pieces I Am was released in June.
I wanted as many people who could hear my voice to understand the importance of her work. Get people to trust, and, oh, this is something safe, and then bam, hit them with Toni Morrison.
Oprah, who idolized the writer, said just last year it is impossible to actually imagine the American literary landscape without Morrison. Oprah said she is our conscience, she is our seer, she is our truth teller.
At Howard University, Morrison studied English. Later, she was the first Black woman to become senior editor at the publisher Random House, where Morrison demanded equal pay.
They don't want to give me the money because I'm a woman, and the men get more? No.
From early in her career, Morrison was an advocate for diverse voices.
Introduces a whole set of Black writers and then takes the stage herself as one of the most preeminent.
In 1970, Morrison published her very first novel, The Bluest Eye. It told the story of an 11-year-old Black girl who prayed for blonde hair and light eyes.
She did not shy away from talking about the hardest of topics.
Professor Yosef Surratt teaches religion and African American studies at Columbia University.
She forces you in some ways by telling the story of the undersides of human experience to think more critically about your own ugliness, about your own pains, your own traumas.
Morrison's 1987 book, Beloved, told the gritty story of a former slave who chose to kill her own baby rather than let it return to slavery. It later became a major motion picture starring Oprah Winfrey.
How long has it been?
In all, Toni Morrison wrote nearly a dozen novels.
It's hard to think of a more significant figure in American letters and of African-American writers at this time.
A Princeton professor, winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature, and in 2008,
and the United States proudly honors her.
Toni Morrison received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Earlier this year, filmmaker Timothy Greenfield Sanders chose to tell Toni's story in a new documentary. Toni Morrison, The Pieces That I Am.
Applause to our Medal of Freedom winners.
Well, I think the pinnacle for a writer has got to be the Nobel Prize. For other kinds of things, flawless character, something like the Glamour Lifetime Achievement Award is most welcome.
When Toni Morrison published Beloved, it was an extraordinary turning point. We can never think about slavery in the same way.
A friend of mine called me up early in the morning and said, Toni, you won the Nobel Prize. And I remember holding the phone thinking, she must be drunk.
Toni Morrison's work shows us through pain all the myriad ways we can come to love. That is what she does, with some words on a page.
Toni Morrison died at a New York hospital Monday night.
In a statement, Morrison's family says she passed away peacefully last night after a brief illness.